Hello, everyone, and my name is Guinness Walker. Welcome to a special edition of the Triggered Podcast, where we're going to be discussing the Brussels attacks. So, with us today, we have Lenny, our very own Belgian. Lenny.
Hello, or as Belgians would say, salam alaikum or whatever. That's pretty much what most Belgians now say, the Muslim greeting, because we're all Muslims now.
Okay. We also have Pat.
Yes, that's correct. I'm here.
We have Val.
Allahu Akbar, comrades.
And we have Kimoy.
Hey.
And we have Gothic.
Who is currently being murdered by Mossad, no doubt.
So let's just jump right into it. Lenny, let's hear what your perspective is or was on the attacks as soon as you heard about them.
Okay.
As our resident Belgian.
So, I suppose I'll just tell you very quickly what happened. The attacks happened Tuesday, and I literally woke up like 11 a.m. pretty much, or 10 a.m., which is about an hour after the attacks, and my family was like, "Hey, Lenny, you should wake up. There is something bad going on in our country." I was like, "Oh, I'll check it out." And then I found out there were bombings in Brussels airport, which is the biggest airport in Belgium, and actually in general it's actually a very big airport. It's not a really small one. I think it's bigger than a lot of airports in other countries. But there was a bombing there, and also there was a bombing in the metro, and it was specifically a metro which went between the EU institutions and the Belgian institutions. So you have this one street in which at one end you have the sort of the EU institutions from the European Union, and then on the other side you have we would call that the Law Street, which is the Belgian institutions like the Senate. You have all stuff there, and between those two there is a metro, and literally between those two there was an explosion. Well, and I woke up and I was kind of pissed off because I was expecting this, and I don't know. It was very chaotic. At least the news was very chaotic because the death toll kept like changing, and just kept stories kept changing. But it happened. I think the death toll is now at 34 people, but there's still a couple of people missing. There are actually an American couple that's actually missing as well, who was at this airport. And yeah, so it was very interesting to see because I've seen. Well, I was also there when the Paris attacks happened, not in person, but I was like watching the live stream of all the news channels, but I never could see the local news because I don't have the Paris local news, but the Belgium local news was absolutely awful. A lot of news papers were blaming this on right wingers and racism when it happened. They also were blaming it on neo-Nazis, stuff like that. And, it was just a lot of self-loading happening. And Belgians like self-loading, apparently. It's just, I don't know, Brussels is a hot spring for terrorism because, first of all, it has huge youth unemployment. The specific area in which these terrorists resided, which is Molenbeek, is an area in which the police don't actually dare come in. There are official police reports of them saying we don't want to go in there because it's too dangerous for us. It has 40% youth unemployment, that specific region. It's very isolated. Most people there don't even talk Dutch or French. They probably talk French, but not Dutch. And it's just terrorists are there, and people in the neighborhood actually hide those terrorists. That's also something that has come out about that. The guy we arrested, I think a few days before this happened, was Salah Abdeslam, which was someone who was from the Paris attacks, who coordinated the attacks, and we couldn't find him, but it turned out that the entire neighborhood was pretty much hiding him. And that's pretty bad if you have a neighborhood in your country that's hiding terrorists. It's very bad.
Well, I think it's also it's undeniably a politically motivated attack, and it's interesting that they say that it was right wingers, it was necessarily these neo-Nazis. Where did they attack? They attacked a metro that was a key. You said it was a key line leading to the EU institutions, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So
so if anything, it seems like they're mad at the people who are doing things.
No, right. But what I'm saying is the newspapers are not necessarily saying that they were doing this because of right-wingers, but they were saying the right-wingers created an environment in which these people could do it, which I find very funny because the city of Brussels is a city that has been run by the PS, which is the French Parti Social, which is a socialist party, and they're definitely not right-wing, so it's very confusing to
So
me.
somehow the non-establishment has made this the case. Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, and we don't even actually. It's the funny thing about Belgium is, we don't really have any right-wing parties. I mean, we have sort of this one French loony party of a bunch of crazies who sort of come together and let's say, let's do something, but they don't really have power. Um, so yeah, it's very weird, and a lot of Belgians, they really like not their own, not necessarily they're sort of they're like asleep or something. I don't know how I can describe it. They sort of everything is happening in this country, and they still sort of look at it as if everything is going okay. It's only a bunch of weirdos. Even though we have an entire neighborhood in our capital which has terrorists which want to kill a lot of Belgians. It's very weird. I don't know. It's
How familiar are you with the history of your own country in recent times?
well, I'm pretty familiar. I mean, one thing I'll say is the public education is very bad at teaching Belgian history. So most people in Belgium don't even know what our national holiday is about, which is pretty weird. But I did some, I learned after school a lot of stuff. So yeah, I would say I'm pretty familiar with Belgian history.
Okay, well, I have a question. You're talking about them blaming neo-Nazis, but who is making that statement? Are you talking about journalists making
No,
that
journalists,
statement?
obviously. Yeah, it's not necessarily political.
What?
It's not necessarily politicians, but it's pretty much all newspapers, because this is also something that's interesting in Belgium. We don't really have alternative news. In sort of America, you sort of have more left-wing papers and more right-wing papers, but in Belgium, it's pretty much all sort of consensus. They pretty much all agree on everything.
What responses have politicians made and political leaders?
Politicians have, okay, that's very difficult because the current politicians have sort of blamed their own institutions and have blamed actually themselves. So our Secretary of State and Secretary of Justice have both given in their resignation because of failures in their departments. But the Prime Minister obviously, the Prime Minister has denied those resignations because he said that would contribute to a political crisis. But I think that was more virtue signaling, to be honest. I don't think they actually meant their resignation. I think they actually knew that they were not gonna, the resignation was not gonna, get approved by the Prime Minister. But obviously what has happened is that the Green Party and the Socialist Party and the Communist Party as well, actually, have started blaming right-wingers. So the left-wing parties have definitely started blaming the right. And the Flemish Nationalist Party, the Flemish Interest, which is sort of the loony right-wing party, the only one we kind of have, they have very much been blamed the EU and immigration policies, which I find a more reasonable position to take than let's blame the non-existent neo-Nazis, because we don't even have neo-Nazis here. They're mostly a bunch of bikers. You have one bar or something, and that's it. So I don't know.
I have a question. With the Flemish nationalists, have they particularly been that concerned about immigration? Or...
Oh yeah, Flemish nationalists is actually the only anti-immigration party. Not necessarily anti-immigration. I would say anti. They've been the only party in my country that has said we should be able to control our own borders. Most other parties says no, the EU will do that for us because the EU's are overlord.
So then they're saying that if every single party in the country isn't pro-immigration, then it's their fault. Whatever anti-immigration parties, it's their fault for whatever happens.
This is the thing as well. I mean, the Flemish National Party is all pretty controversial party. Not necessarily controversial. Sorry. Let me rephrase. We have two Flemish nationalist parties. We have the modern Flemish Nationalist Party, which is in my Flemish government, which is a majority government, but they're sort of posing right-wing. They're not actually right-wing at all. And then you have the extreme, quote-unquote, Flemish nationalists, and they call themselves Flemish Interests. And they, very small, they used to be bigger, but they have been banging on about immigration for, or banging on, that's supposed to be sort of smeared, but they have been talking about immigration a lot of times, and they're also the only really anti-Islam party in a sense, because they do a lot of they pander to a lot of I'd say, anti-Islamic feelings that I do think are actually growing in Belgium, because I don't necessarily, I am still very pessimistic about, people's responses, but I also acknowledge that people are responding to this negatively, some of them at least, but a lot of them, they keep their SJW feelings happy while they live in their nice middle-class houses in the capital, away from Molenbeek, but then they're, I don't know. It's
So
Now,
sort
what
of,
would you
What are they?
say would be the worst of the apologia you've seen concerning
You cut out though.
recently?
I didn't hear you. Sorry.
Cut out
What
at
would
the
be the
end.
worst? All right, what would be the worst apologia you've seen recently about Islam since the attacks?
Okay, so one thing that really annoyed me was that a lot of people in my country were saying this attack is horrible, but I'm more worried about what's going to happen to the Muslims. And I think forgot, but I think there was one Green Party member who was saying stuff like, "Oh, I don't actually know. It's just I can't actually remember, but it's mostly simply Islam didn't do nothing. These people are funded by the Belgian government or whatever, or they're funded by, I don't know. Actually no, actually never mind. I know what the worst one is. It's that these terrorists were funded by Israel and the Mossad. That's what Muslims have. The Muslims I know have to say. Sorry?
I knew it. The Jews did it.
Yeah, that's something I've been. I mean, the Muslims in my classes, the school I went to, my high school was, I'd say 70-60% Muslim, and a lot of them I talked to, and for example, their response to the Paris attacks was immediately blame Mossad and Israel, and also, and what their reasoning was is like, oh, the Israelis want to make Muslims look bad. That was
So,
their
Lenny,
reasoning.
are you-
So,
Are
sorry,
you-
Pat, did you have a question?
Yeah. Lenny, are you aware of Belgium's draining law? The
What do you mean draining?
Drogo-Reagan strike?
Sorry, I'm draining law?
It's a draining law. So the parliament in 2005 passed a law to cut funding to the federal state quote undemocratic parties unquote. So political parties, I guess, apparently, obviously get federal funding.
Right. Yeah. So I think what that means is that they've cut funding to parties that don't support democracy the democracy that they like. So I think they even cut funding to parties that would say, I want to do away with the forced voting, because we have forced voting. We don't actually have voting rights. We have voting duties, as we would say. That's at least how we learn it in Belgium. And I think if a party would say, I want to do away with the voting duties, I think that would actually count as anti-democratic. So I think they will probably lose their funding if they do that. Also, you only get funding once you reach a certain percentage of votes, by the way. If you lose that votes, you don't necessarily get your funding. So you have to be semi-popular. I think it's only 6% of the votes or something, or 4%. No, actually, I think it's 4%. Yeah, 4%. But you also have to espouse certain democratic values. So, fascists don't get funding. But, it's sort of weird. The government gives you money if you espouse the right political correctness, pretty much. And that's, the Flemish Nationalist Party, which I was talking about, the Flemish interests, they've actually been banned in the past for hate speech in my country. So.
What party is in control of your country? What's the name of the country?
Okay, so this is something complicated. So you have 3 governments in Belgium. You have the French government, the Dutch government, and the federal government. I'll talk about the federal government. The federal government is a coalition of the Christian Democrats, the Liberals, the Flemish nationalists, and the French Liberals and the French Christian Democrats. But the Flemish government, my government, is actually dominated by the moderate Flemish nationalists, Christian Democrats, and Liberals. And Liberals, the way we would define, liberals in my country are socially liberal and economically liberal, meaning they want less taxes, or that's at least their sort of creed. But when they get in power, what they actually do is they increase taxes. I don't know how that works, but they do. And that's, and they're all very pro-EU. None of them has any criticism of the EU. The French government, I'm pretty sure the French government has been for 40 years, has been the Socialist Party. but I think recently it actually lost a lot of votes. I think now it's actually the Liberal Party, the French Liberal Party, that's now in power there. But again, you have so many governments in Belgium. It isn't simply like one federal government. You have separate institutions
Well,
per region.
can you explain a little bit about? I'm totally unfamiliar with the geography. How is it? How does this Belgian, Flemish, French breakup work?
Right. Okay.
Where-
So the northern part of Belgium is sort of,
Yeah.
I'd say, the northern part. That's the Flemish part, which is the part that's well, that's at the border of the Netherlands and also part of Germany. And then when you go to south, you're gonna have, if you go south, just really south, you're gonna have the French part. But if you go southeast, there's a small area which we got from Germany after the First World War, and that's called the East Cantons. So we also have a small German portion. And that German portion also has its own government, by the way. So that's also, it's very small, but it has its own government, and they're actually not part of the French government, of the federal government, because they are counted as French for the federal government. They're not counted as they don't have their own representatives in the federal government, if that makes any sense. But they have their local German government, and they talk German, but on the borders they talk sort of a French-German weird mixture. But yeah, so we have two big areas, and you have one very small German area. And then you have Brussels, which is supposed to be bilingual. And Brussels actually lies in Flanders, but it is bilingual. So it's Dutch-French, but they primarily actually speak French for some reason. Even though geographically, they're located in the Flemish part of Belgium. So that's Belgium. It's not really that easy, but yeah.
What would you say is, I mean, other than the obvious, where would you say the root of the problem for the? I mean, you obviously have a limited perspective, but
yes, sure.
What would you say the root of the problem is from your perspective?
Okay.
Here.
So what has happened, I'd say, is a couple of things. I mean, definitely immigration policy, and that's simply because of two things. We have very large immigration, and no real effort to integrate. I mean, most immigrants that come here don't even speak the main language. They speak, I mean, when I go to a lot of public services are like filled to the brim with people from other countries, but they don't actually speak Dutch at all. They speak some sort of very, very basic English. No, very basic Dutch. It's sort of like Indian people on the whatever phone companies or something. But it's even worse than that. So we don't have an integration policy. We have way too much immigration. I'd say also, partly we've kind of forgotten, sort of, we don't really know what it, I mean, there's no real effort to, they always talk about Belgian values, but they never define it. They sort of go, oh, Belgian values are, we love the European Union, that's our values. Also, I think this is all the problem with Belgium is actually, I don't know if it's actually a sustainable country in general, because the Flemish part really dislikes the French part, and the French part don't really like the Flemish part, but the French part kind of need the Flemish part because the Flemish part is like economically better and gives them a lot of money as well. So there's also hatred in Belgium, which is also why there's a big Flemish nationalist party, which is why Flemish nationalism is pretty popular in Flanders, and also because you have differences of language in the country itself is a bit weird. But I think immigration policy, I think definitely EU membership was a mistake. I mean, Belgium was one of the first EU founding members. We were actually one of the 6 founding members. And, I won't deny that, it's probably given us some benefit in the past, maybe small benefit. But now it's simply turned into a federal superstate, which is what a lot of Belgians actually want. And that makes it sure that Belgian Parliament and Flemish Parliament and stuff can actually legislate. Everything comes from the EU, which is also a big problem because, the EU isn't, I don't know, the EU is really, I really dislike the EU. I mean, I don't know. So you want to ask me a question, you can go ahead.
Well, okay, what exactly, how much consensus is there between the parties, and is there sort of is the EU basically dominating your country in the sense that there's plenty of dissent between the countries about how they want to run the country, or between the parties about how they want to run the country, but the EU is overriding that?
Yes, pretty much. So what happens is that I would say all the parties except extreme quote-unquote Flemish nationalist party all love the EU. And when I say love, I'm actually not even kidding. They all really like the EU. Um, there's been some criticism recently from the moderate Flemish Nationalist Party. For me, it feels kind of like the Tory government in Britain. They don't really do anything about it. They simply say, "Oh, look, we have some minor criticism, but we'll make some kind of deal that settle everything." Uh, but yeah, there is disagreement between the parties, but it's it's not really. It's sort of, I don't know. They don't really disagree. They simply, I don't know. I think it's probably the amount of welfare that they disagree on. That's it, maybe. But I mean, all social issues, most of them agree. I mean, every party here is very socially liberal, like every party, and even to the crazy social liberal. Like they really want everything. I don't know.
Well, I think that
What is the government going to do in response to this, other than like the fake?
They are gonna they're gonna grandstand probably. What they're gonna do is they're gonna probably want more surveillance, which they're probably gonna get because the EU actually doesn't mind surveillance because the EU actually wants its own surveillance unit. Or actually, I think it already has one. And the Belgians are actually, I think they also want surveillance because it makes them feel safer for some reason. Gonna be more. Well, I mean, I'm not sure. There's gonna be maybe a week of border closing, but afterwards the border is gonna be open again. And that's it. They're just gonna grandstand. Not gonna do much. I mean, the only thing that has happened, which is somewhat surprising, is now it turns out that a lot of these things were actually things that could have been prevented by our departments. So I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I don't think it's going to happen. That much is going to happen. It's like Paris. I mean, it didn't really happen that much after the Paris attacks. There was a lot of like mourning, but didn't really happen that much politically. I mean, sure, you had closing of the borders, but afterwards it got reopened again, and nothing else happened afterwards. So it's going to happen the same in Belgium. There's no real response. I mean, one thing I did know is that the Flemish Nationalist Party is more popular now, obviously, because
When it comes to the perpetrators, do we know, or were they immigrants, or are they from Belgium, or what?
Yes. So two of them were brothers who were Belgian citizens. They came from, if I'm not mistaken, okay, they were definitely immigrants, but they had Belgian passports. But one of them actually went to Syria. The Turkish government arrested him, sent him to the Netherlands, and said, "Guys, this is a Syria warrior. Please put him in prison." Netherlands sent him back to Belgium because he was a Belgian citizen. And what the Justice Department in Belgium did was like, "Well, you're a Syria warrior, but we'll let you go." And let him go. And then afterwards, they realized, "Oops, we made a mistake." Because now the guy's on the Interpol list. We're like, oops, we're going to find him back now. And the other brother was someone who had a lot of charges in Belgium. I think he was like robbery, blah, blah, blah. And that's going to get you like 2 years in prison in Belgium. And they got that one brother got an early release from prison. But afterwards, they realized that the early release didn't meet all the requirements, so then they wanted him back in prison, but obviously the guy was already gone. And so, yeah, afterwards, they found him back when he blew up the airport. That's when they were, oops, there's this guy. And the third guy is someone in connection to the brothers. But all of these are well, they're not born here. They're all people who either are second generation, so they are born here, but they don't really integrate, or they're third generation, people who came here like 20 years ago or something, and didn't actually get any integration and simply, went to Brussels and went to their own sort of Molenbeek or whatever, and they went into their own area. But yeah, so all of them, well, there was no real, well, I'd say there was not really a Belgian citizen, well, there was a Belgian citizen, but there wasn't a native Belgian, I can say it, I suppose. But there was, all of them were immigrants to some extent. Either second generation, so they were born here, so in a sense they're not really immigrants, or third generation. I think the two brothers were actually third generation. But I don't really care about that because, to some extent, I mean, the integration should happen. If you're a second-generation immigrant, you should be integrated here already, but they weren't because there was no integration policy.
Would you say that the biggest problem that is contributing to this is it these social enclaves, these countries that are letting? Because my country's doing this too, letting societies, get completely isolated within the larger society and
Yeah,
then
definitely.
operate as sort of separate, entities. Is that the bigger problem, or
Well,
is it just
definitely. I mean, definitely. It's a state. Well, I mean, our state has a policy of multiculturalism, which is literally let people live in their own enclaves, pretty much, and they really encourage that. And they don't really encourage integration, but it's not really the only problem. I mean, just simply, Belgium isn't really. There's a big degeneration of society in general, I'd say, in Belgium. It's not necessarily only the enclaves that have helped us. It's just, I don't know. It's just nobody really. I mean, the politics is just corrupt as hell. Um, there's no real. I mean, there is trust in politics, but only at the EU level. But I don't know. It's in general. It's just a decay. I'd say Belgium, in general. Well, yeah, that's it. I think.
Hypothetically, though, if they did shut down their borders, hypothetically, would that change anything since you
Not
have so
really,
many?
because we already have so many people here who want to kill us that it really doesn't matter. The only way we could solve this was draconian deportation forces, which I wouldn't want, but that's the only way we could actually get the people who want to kill us out of here. Because Molenbeek is literally filled with people. Pretty much everyone in Molenbeek despises Belgian society, has contacts to terrorists, and has possible contacts to illegal weapons. Because Brussels is the biggest illegal weapon trade in Europe, pretty much. So, they can get a weapon and, they can do something. And Molenbeek has no law and order. Pretty much the entirety of Belgium doesn't actually have law and order. So it's just the closing of the borders might help possible people from coming back from Syria, for example, but there are at least so many people who would be ready to attack Belgians that I don't think it's going to solve anything. It's going to solve future attacks to some extent, like I said, not all of them, because there's going to be another attack, I'm pretty sure, in not this year maybe, but in the coming years there's going to be more attacks, and maybe not in Belgium, but definitely in Europe. And this isn't actually. I mean, they all say that ISIS is coordinating this, but if it wasn't ISIS, it would be some other Islamist organization. It isn't necessarily ISIS that is doing this. It's simply people, Islamists who want to kill people. Maybe some of them were connected to Al Qaeda in the past, and now they're connected to ISIS.
how would you what do you think would be a good proposal for how to deal with the situation in the long term?
Okay, I think there would be two. There would be domestic and foreign. I think we have to have a less interventionist foreign policy, definitely. I'm not necessarily saying that it's our foreign policy that caused these people to attack them. I'm simply saying that I do think it can contribute to some of these sentiments felt by these already, disenfranchised Islamists who want to kill Belgians, but or kill people in general. And domestically, like, I don't know. I think it's already too late. We could maybe save parts. I mean, we could obviously. Okay, obviously we need strong. We would need some. I think we definitely need more immigration laws, more integration. I'd say something to do with the EU, but I don't know what, because I don't think Belgium's ever going to leave the EU. I think Belgium, Germany are going to stay in until it absolutely collapses. So I know some other countries as well. But I think, I don't know. I can only hope that Belgium. I mean, Belgium has pretty much participated in every foreign intervention with the U.S. and Britain as well. Mostly we deliver planes and bombers, because we actually that's the only thing we really have. We have decent air force. So yeah, I mean, I think foreign we have to be less interventionist, and domestic we have to be more integration. But like I said, I think it's already too late. Not necessarily saying it's gonna like burn
Well,
everything.
okay, yeah, that's Belgium, but what about the
Oh, in
problem
other
on the
countries.
larger scale?
Oh, sure. Well, obviously less interventionism from the West in general. And I would say not really be afraid of sort of being proud of your own culture and not necessarily bowing down to anything else. I don't know. That would seem to me to be clever. Because what has happened as well is that we've allowed this to grow in Belgium simply because we were very afraid of Belgian culture being superior to other cultures. Not necessarily because they are, but in well, relative to our government, because our government is supposed to be based on Belgian culture, values and whatever. And uh, I'd say more skepticism towards huge federal institutions like the EU. I'm not sure.
Wait, what does that have to do with it?
Well, no, it has to do a lot of it, because what a lot of Europeans do is literally accept anything the EU does. Just by nature. They don't actually question anything. They simply go, oh yeah, the EU is there to help us. It's not there to, it's not like these people are selfish people who like having a big federal superstate. No, they're just nice people. I don't know. I'm not here to peddle conspiracies. I'm simply saying that I think we have to be no, it's just more skeptical of the EU. Most Europeans have to be. I don't know. And
Well,
it
I
has,
think
it has
connection
to
of
do with
the
it because
EU.
no, it has to do with it because the EU is very. I mean, the reason we have so much immigration is because of the EU. Because the EU tells its members you can't control your immigration, at least EU integration. To some extent, you can't control non-EU, but the European Union doesn't really like you limiting immigration that much. And in their founding treaty, they say they want ever closer union. You know, and I have nothing against union of countries, but I have something against countries losing their own sovereignty, and then having some international organization and say, "Oh, look, we have a solution here." That's exactly what's happening. A lot of EU politicians are now saying the EU needs more power to deal with this issue, and they really don't actually, because they're the main cause of a lot of these issues. Because they allowed mass immigration, they don't really. The EU doesn't actually care about integration. I think they mostly care about low-wage workers coming in, so their friends can have their fun, their waiters and their cleaning ladies. I don't know. I don't think. I don't think we. I think the EU really needs to be criticized more.
Well, it's interesting because like people forget that there was a proposal to do something similar over here not long ago. There
The
was
North American Union.
yes, and people tried to. There was many proposals to basically create the Amero and standardize the currency and make Mexico, Canada, and U.S. one not country but uh, one basically under one government. But the point is that people were very, very opposed to that,
Hmm.
and for many good reasons. And people who were opposed to that weren't heavily criticized as being, just they have no idea what they're talking about. But for some
Hmm.
reason, this is sort of accepted as the norm in Europe. And
I think it's actually simply because it's partly because of false history that has been peddled. So what the EU would use as justification would say, oh, the Second World War was started because of nationalism. So if you care about your own country too much, you're going to get a lot of conflict with other countries. So we need the EU to sort of handle conflicts between countries. But the EU has caused more conflicts, I would say, than actually solved any. So I think a lot of Europeans are actually sort of afraid, and I think a lot of this is actually just World War II scare and guilt, especially in Germany and also in Belgium, partly. But the EU believes that the EU saved a war between France and Germany, which they never did. But I think this is a reason because you in Canada. I'm not saying Canadians didn't have to. I mean, Canadians fought in the Second World War, but your continent wasn't bombed to shit. you
no.
know. So I think it's partly to do with the Second World War and the first one, actually, to some extent, that we in Europe are more willing to sort of say, oh no, our national sovereignty, that's what caused the Second World War, so it's evil. Let's give it away to some institution.
Where
Yes.
do you think the because I think it's interesting. There should be a line between because I think we can all agree, or I would assume most of us would agree that there has been a clear correlation between extreme nationalism and some of the
Sure.
craziness that comes on the right. So where does the line fall between being a reasonable nationalist?
Uh, well, I mean, I don't like nationalists, but I don't like the word nationalist. I think patriot makes more sense. But I think it's simply, I mean, once you start talking about gassing people who are not part of your ethnic group, then I think there's a problem. But I'm not sure. I'm not going to propose lines on nationalism. That's not. I'm not here. I simply think what has happened in Belgium is that we've had a. I think it was called an it's called an, it's use a Greek word, sort of an oikophobia, which means a fear of home to some extent. Not necessarily fear of home, but simply we've denigrated our own culture so much that it's
Yeah.
that's like the very pretty much the opposite of sort of extreme fascism. Sort of, oh, Belgian culture is nothing, just let the Islamists take over and they'll solve everything. And I mean, it's exactly, I mean, the sentiment, what you think, it's sort of, Belgium is very Swedish in a sense, very self-loading, and it's actually very similar to Sweden, I would say. I would say it's definitely the Sweden of West Europe, combined with Germany as well, partly. The only problem I have with the the extreme right-wing nationalists is that they partly, at least in my country, are a figment of the imagination. They don't actually exist. There are some, literally, like, you can find a dozen of people who believe they should be killing people, but even the people in the Flemish interest group don't actually want to kill anyone or something. It's in my country it's used as a boogeyman, and it's the same, especially in Germany. In Germany, it's especially they have actually the neo-Nazi scare, and obviously they had neo-Nazis after the Second World War. But now they barely exist because it's so ingrained in German culture and actually to some extent Belgian culture that you can't be Nazi. And obviously I don't I don't like Nazism. I'm just saying it's I don't think um, well I just think you shouldn't be gassing people. I think that's what
Well, okay,
nationalism.
but if by that, then would you go as far as some of the nationalists who say things like on the alt right, who would say things like it should be 3%, maybe 5% top non-white? Would you go that
No, the
far?
problem is, but I'm not proposing nationalism ethnically on racial grounds. I'm
Well,
proposing
yeah, because
nationalism
I
more on
think
cultural grounds.
yeah,
And not even
again,
nationalism. I see it more as again for me, it's more of sort of conservatism in a sense, which is sort of conserving your culture. And that doesn't mean you kill people who are not of your culture. It simply means that people who come in your country accept your try to integrate in your culture, not that the country itself has to adapt to the immigrants. To some extent, you have to slightly adapt to the immigrants, but what has happened in Belgium is that you've completely adapted the entire country to the immigrants, and there's been no adaptation from the other way. Uh, I mean, I don't know. So yeah, that's for me. It's more cultural, I suppose. But some people will call me cuck for that because I'm not supporting the white race enough. I don't know. But yeah,
I,
for
I
me,
think
it's more
I think
American.
that there's a good distinction that you made there, though, between cultural and racial. I would love Gothic if he would speak up, but I think that there's an interesting distinction there because I think that what should be most important is the culture of the country and not the ethnicity of the country. So if you have a bunch of people who are all of the same culture and they all
Mhm.
share similar values, they can integrate just fine with each other.
Sure.
And it's not the I would think that it's not the ethnicity that makes the clash is the culture clash,
No,
right?
obviously, if you're gonna bring in like very, very basic tribal Africans, you're not gonna integrate in Belgium. That's more to do, I suppose, with not necessarily culture, but obviously with their well, not saying all Africans. I'm saying sort of the very tribal people who talk with their weird sort of voices. What's that language called? Forgot those. I don't know. Whatever. I mean, obviously, for me, it's more. I don't know. It's that's that's to me it's important. It's simply you preserve your culture. That's what you do. Simply because I'd say once the culture denigrates all the institutions, not necessarily denigrate, but they all are open to questioning. Very not obviously they're always open to questioning, but this sort of their no, I don't know how can I say this. It's sort of their foundation breaks because I'd say the institutions sort of rely on the culture. I mean, I don't think America could exist. I don't think, let's say America, you take America, I don't think the American Constitution could work in Belgium. I mean, I think it obviously would, but I don't, culturally, Belgians would have opposition to it. So that's it's. I think you have to be. I think culture is important because it is important for your law and it's just your history. And I don't know.
Well, okay. I want to address because Gothic's made a lot of points here, and he can't talk, so I'll read a little bit of what he said. He says, "What's wrong with the racial aspect? 5% max of non-whites makes perfect sense. The idea of multiculturalism was always that you could use only the good things from different groups and leave all the bad ones. The extreme left calls you racist when you want to refuse to integrate the bad parts in. Good nationalism would always work in order to improve the standards of its own culture. It may even borrow." Good standards from other cultures, but it won't borrow bad elements. It would fight against such. So I agree with pretty much all of that, but I don't agree with the ethnic purity. And again, that the distinction I make is that I don't think that multiculturalism is necessarily. I mean, again, culture and ethnic. It's not multi. ethnicism. It's multiculturalism, which is the problem. I don't think having a diverse demographic of race who have similar not even ideology, but similar values, and who have a similar culture will have no problem integrating with each other. And the problem of people having integration comes from vastly different cultures that aren't being told, well, welcome, you're in our country now, you need to integrate. Doesn't mean you need to eviscerate your culture's identity. It just means you need to adapt to, you need to take away the things that are, so anything that was illegal, that was currently, previously illegal in your culture, that is now illegal, you can't do that. Stuff like that, and that's pretty obvious stuff, and I think that everybody can agree on that. I just don't think that necessarily, I think that also promoting ethnic purity is, even if you're not doing it for these reasons, you're going to give tons of credibility to the people who are like, okay, we need ethnic purity because fuck everybody who's not our ethnicity, and who end up going to that far degree. And I think that's a danger. I think even if those people aren't as bad as they could be, or even if they're not like, full on, we need to cleanse the world, I think they're sort of the SJWs or of the other side. You give them that ground, and they're just going to keep pulling that rope. And that's just kind of how I see it.
I don't know. I mean, for me, it's simply, I mean, the West is always, not always, but I mean, well, obviously, in history it has been Caucasian, but I just think, I'm simply saying that Belgium should have been more monocultural in a sense. It should have more asserted its own culture. And I think it's very weird that it's pretty much, I think, one of the first times in history you literally had this, not necessarily Belgium, but sort of the West, you literally had these countries which pretty much bashed their own cultures constantly. And that's the only thing it did. Sweden has bashed its culture out of existence, and so has Belgium. I think Germany to some extent as well. It's very weird, I don't know.
Do you think there's a distinction, and this is maybe this is just me personally, but I make a distinction between being proud and being, I'm not sure what the word is. I wouldn't use the word proud when I'm talking about like patriotism.
No, I don't like proud. I think proud is wrong, even though I use proud a lot. What I mean proud is simply accept that it is your culture.
Yeah, okay, exactly. That's what I mean too, because.
And I'd say defend it to some extent, but I just think, especially, this is especially more to do with politics. I'm not saying individual people have to do Pledge of Allegiances to the Belgian flag, even though that doesn't really exist. We don't actually have a pledge. America does have that, but I'm simply stating that there should be some appreciation of your own culture, and not necessarily denigration of it, which has pretty much what has been happening. In Belgium's past. I can't talk about other countries, but it seems to be a pattern in the West in general, even actually in America, where I suppose SJWs have been getting more power, and there's more of the denigration of your own culture. I'm not saying you have to sort of say my culture is the best ever. Oh, I mean my culture includes a king who killed a bunch of Africans in the past. No, that's not necessarily proud of my culture, but it was someone who was in there. So
it's interesting because from my perspective as a Canadian, Canadians they're bad in terms of this mentality, but they haven't gone full-fledged. We hate our country, and mainly I think part of the reason is because there's not a lot you can look back on our country and go, we did this, we did that. The closest you could do is tie everything that we ever did to the British, and then take that. Excuse me. But I think if Canada could save itself from the going full down this slide, there is still a little bit of the ability to be not proud, but to be aware of your country's history and not denigrate your own culture. And I think if we, because like for example, there's not a significant, like if you look at in America, there's this, there's almost ghettoized areas of America with just humongous populations of blacks. You don't really have that in Canada. The areas.
What about the indigenous people?
Yes, I was getting to that. So it's different groups. right? It's different groups that have failed to integrate in Canada. So I think this kind of points to the fact that it's not really ethnic that makes it hard to integrate. It's circumstances of how the country grew up, how the country came to be, who were there's a lot of different circumstances that make the foundation for how the country's going to end up dealing with multiculturalism.
Well, my
And I
country.
think,
Sorry, go ahead.
oh, sorry, I was just going to finish and say, I
Yeah, go
think
ahead.
that it'll be easiest if we stop this promoting this social enclave, this, okay, you can kind of do whatever you want as your culture. You don't need to adapt. You don't need to integrate. And I think if you move past that and you take some of the mentality of the Western countries and you mix that in with some of what the European Union, because I think that the European Union isn't all bad, but there's a lot of bad in there, probably mostly. And I think if you take some of the good ideas and you mix, you can get there's somewhere between the lines here. There is a good idea. There's
I mean,
a
sure.
good
I
set
mean,
of rules for
Europe
running
is
a country.
Europe is going to be in some sort of not necessarily union, but I think it's always going to have some sort of agreement with each other.
I
Because
think so too.
it's simply even in Europe's history. I mean, Europe was a long time of history was a very big was the Holy Roman Empire was very big in Europe, and you had a lot of these unions between countries and a lot of fights as well. I think it's going to be natural. There's going to be some union. The problem is with the European Union is that, well, I think it's simply just another sort of. It's just a very bad construct because it takes away a lot of decision making from national countries and takes it all to like international agreements, which
It's almost like and maybe this is a strange comparison, but it's almost like the federal government in the United States and the evisceration of states' rights.
yeah.
I think
I
it's a
do think
little
there's
bit
a big
like that.
difference because the states obviously they have their different cultures, but it's not like every state has a different language, different history. Oh, well, obviously it has different
Yeah,
history.
no, I meant more legally than I meant culturally. Like,
Sure, I don't know. Which,
I don't know. Like I said, it's a silly comparison,
I
but
mean, sure. I mean, Europe has its ECB, which I suppose could be compared to the Federal Reserve in the U.S. I mean, I think to some extent it makes sense, but I'm not sure. Um, it's simply, I mean, I think a lot of Europe is simply people sort of wanting power.
well, I mean,
And
Gothic just put in the chat the EU wants to establish a single European army.
yes,
So
exactly. No,
yeah,
exactly. No, exactly. That's exactly what they want, and which is why I think actually comparisons to even the Soviet Union, which I'm not saying they killed millions. I'm simply saying there is some comparison in the structure, because once it launched its own, the euro is a sort of European ruble to some extent, like the Soviet had. I'm not saying it's the Soviet Union. I'm simply saying there are some similar constructs, especially the European Commission, which is an unelected, um, an unelected decision-making board, sort of similar to the Supreme Soviets, the Soviet Union had. But
would you?
it's simply very. I think it's a very bad concept. I mean, I have no problem with. There's nothing wrong with European coordination and trade agreements with each other, but there is something wrong with a massive political entity that has a lot of power and wants to make its own laws and pass it on everyone in the member states.
Do you think that the EU is going the route of Soviet Union in that eventually it'll just be Europe?
I mean, that would be very pessimistic. I mean, I do think it's possible. It simply is very. I mean, a lot of Europeans are very sort of not submissive, but they really don't care. They sort of have their happy lives and they're like, oh no, I don't care about Europe. It's all fine. But Europe gets more and more power every week, pretty much. And I don't know. I'm not necessarily saying they're going to kill millions and put people in camps, but I'm simply saying that there is some similarity.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't go that far either, and I think if something like that would happen, it would be far, far, far down the road.
Sure.
It would have to.
If that
But
ever would happen, we have to have some apocalyptic scenario of a lot of things happening. But,
yeah, a lot of
I'm
shit
not sure
happens.
actually because if let's say the Brits leave, I'm not sure. I mean, I don't think I'm not sure how long the European Union is going to sustain itself. I think it can go for a long time, but it might actually collapse. in the future.
Yeah, that's what Gothic is saying. The EU may collapse considering how they treated Greece. I
Hmm.
think that's an interesting
Well,
point.
I think
Oh,
I can speak now. Well, basically they bought the euro to Greece when they shouldn't have, because the economy of Greece is much smaller and much weaker than the economy of Germany. So the currency standard is much different. So
Hmm.
they shouldn't ever did that, but they did it anyway, and they are constantly doing that. Portugal is in a state of crisis. Nobody talks about it, but it is. So is Italy. So is Spain. That's why Podemos in Spain is coming to power. That's why Syriza in Greece came to power. So obviously the EU is run by a bunch of idiots that are basically bought up by big corporations. It's not much different to the federal government of the United States.
that was kind of my point, and I think that
It's big corporations, but it is. I'm pretty sure. I mean, I definitely think it are. They are definitely one. I think definitely. Well, to some extent, I think that's true. I think the Euro project was just a mistake from the beginning. I mean,
Well,
I'm
I
not
think
sure.
I'm sorry, let it go on.
No, you go on.
I think it's interesting that the EU, well, more in particular, the Euro monetary policy, set up these standards that countries would have to follow to accept the euro, and then their primary goal wasn't to establish a currency; it was to get as many people in the currency as
Hmm.
possible. So then, when countries like the pigs, Portugal, Ireland, Greece, Spain, um, even though their balance sheets didn't look right, they said, "Well, we need to get everybody onto this currency, so we're going to accept you anyway." So
Hmm.
standards that aren't followed.
Right. The euro was, I think, more a political project than actually an economic one because I think what they wanted to do was launch a currency, and uh, and it was definitely going to fail if it didn't have because what happens is that so obviously the currency is ruled in the currency, is the policies surrounding the currency are all done in Europe, but all the separate economic policies are done in the countries. So I think it was simply another way of Europe trying to get an economic department there so they could control all the states' financial stuff. So they could, I mean, all the eurozone members, everyone who has a euro, they could handle their finances pretty much. And I think that's what they actually wanted to do. And this is actually also, I think, partly that's also what they want to do now with the immigration thing. They also now want to have a European immigration. They pretty much already have a European immigration department, but that's what they now want to make up so that they pretty much control all the member states' immigration policies, which would be, again, this is all very big, super state stuff in my opinion. It's very they're getting a lot of power over a lot of ground, and except in Britain, there's really no resistance to it. And maybe some other countries, there are obviously some parties rising, like in France, Le Pen's party, and in Germany, you have the Alternative für Deutschland party has now got a lot of votes. But it's not. I don't know. It's very. I do think it's actually dangerous to some extent, giving these people so much power. I'm
Does
not
Belgium
saying they're
have
going
a
to kill millions. I'm just
Does
saying.
Belgium have a census or
Yes.
some statistic
Well, actually,
collecting?
most of it actually comes from the Euro how we call it, Euro Palometer. There's a barometer. They have one sort of thing where all the member states have certain polls, and that's where we get a lot of information from.
Do
Because,
they know about
for example,
the?
in our constitution, it actually states that you can't poll people on religious opinions. That's actually legal according to the constitution of my
You
country.
can't poll, you can't
wow.
ask them what their beliefs
But,
are.
the European Union can ignore that, so the European Union can actually ask you about your religion because they can override the Constitution. They don't really care about the Constitution anyway. Sorry, what were you going to say, Kimoy?
Well, when it comes to the immigration of into the country,
Right, you want to
when did
approval
it? When has it? When
or
when has the demographic shift started?
you mean the demographic? Oh, okay. Well, I can talk to you about why we brought in the first immigrants. In the 1960s, we brought in mostly Moroccans and Turks because we quote unquote needed labor, even though we actually already have pretty much had actually a lot of youth unemployment at that time. We see one to, and but we nevertheless we let millions of Turks, mostly not millions but thousands of Turks come and work in the mines, and a lot of stuff. And that's actually where our first immigration policy really started. For example, that's also something I wanted to say when you guys were talking about Belgium really didn't have sort of I don't think we really had ghettos. I mean, we did, but there was mostly just Belgians. It wasn't sort of an ethnic population. It wasn't like blacks or indigenous people or something. It was simply poor people living in sort of poor circumstances, not necessarily because of anything, I don't know. I'm not saying it's because of oppression or something. Simply the circumstances that they had. So I'd say demographic shift started in the 60s and went on I'd say obviously went on. I think it especially started in the 80s and the 90s, which when we started doing mass immigration on a mass level, that's when the demographics changed. And when you talk about the sort of census, I mean, a recent census I read from the European Union said that the attitudes towards EU immigration is very high in Belgium, but the attitudes towards non-EU immigration is very much on decline. So a lot of people are not really happy with it. And like I said, they might not be happy, but there is no political party that will do anything about it. So it's not going
would
to
you
be
say
anything.
that? Sorry, did you want to finish?
No. I just said nothing's going to change, even though they believe that they have different attitudes now. No political party will do anything about it. That's what I'm saying. So go ahead.
Would you say that that the EU some of or all of the blame lies with the EU
Not
for the
all of it.
Brussels
Oh, no.
bringing it back to Brussels?
Not all. No, definitely not. But I mean, to some extent, yes. But the problem is the EU is, you know, Belgians elect members of European Parliament, so I'd say EU is partly to blame, but the EU is simply part of the Belgian political process. So it's simply, yeah, I'd say to some extent, yeah, it's the EU, but also Belgium, and just in general, I'd say also the West's. I'd say it's probably crazy foreign policies we've been having with funding rebel groups and dictators.
Below the European Union, who is the head of your country? Like a
Uh,
president?
Prime Minister is our head. Obviously, the real head is the King Philip the First. King Philip the First. Yeah, King Philip
Oh,
the
you
First.
guys still use constitutional monarchy?
Oh yeah, we're definitely constitutional monarchy. The only reason I personally want to preserve it, the only reason I want to preserve it, because if the constitutional monarchy falls in my country, then Belgium pretty much falls, because that's the only thing keeping the French and the Dutch part together. If we don't have the monarchy in the country, then the Dutch and French part will simply split up, and maybe that's a good thing. I'm not sure, but as long as if I want to be in the interest of Belgium keeping together, then I have to be in favor of keeping the monarchy, because that's the only because if we remove the monarchy, we have to rewrite our entire constitution. And when that happens, the Dutch will split from the French, and the French will split from the Dutch. It's definitely going to happen.
Okay, so you're King Lenny, and it's
I can't do
Sunday.
anything. I can't do anything. No,
Hold
the
on. Okay,
constitutional.
so then you're Prime Minister Lenny. Okay,
Yeah, fine.
you're Prime Minister Lenny, and it's last Sunday, 3 days before the attack, and
Mm.
you
2
can see
days.
the future. How do you stop it?
Um. mm, Well,
Actually, I'll give you 3 months. You got
3
three
months.
months. Yeah.
Okay. Drastically reform the Justice Department. So that it doesn't punish criminals for 2 years when they, for example, our Justice Department recently had a case of a mass pedophile who I think raped like 5 people, like kids. The guy got I think 3 years in prison. 3 years. People who kill people with cars get 1 year of driver's license suspension, and that's it. So our Justice Department is very feeble, which means that people aren't really scared to commit crimes. I mean, they're not really deterred into not committing crimes, and law has to deter people from killing people. The reason you have a law against killing people is because you want to make sure that people don't get
So you would
killed.
harshen the
Yes,
punishments
definitely. I would also reform the police department partly, because that entire thing is now pretty much non-existent. So what I would definitely do is get law and order back, if I could, as a prime minister. I'm not sure to what extent I could.
Yeah, if it's
But
anything like my country, it would be very difficult. But
yeah, I would obviously have. I would probably spend 3 months pretty much just annoying the shit out of the EU. No, but I would try to get immigration policies going that I'm not sure, but I would obviously try my best to. Uh, Actually, I would probably clear out Molenbeek. I would go into Molenbeek with the military, and I would actually clear that entire area out, not killing people, but simply do an entire house search, even though that might be seen as like authoritarian. But the amount of terrorists in that area is insane. It's the entire area are people who hide terrorists, which I think is actually you actually in America, if you do that, you can actually get charged. I think in my country you can as well. Is it like embedding terrorists? Is that like how to
I
charge?
think yes, yeah, you can get charged.
Yeah, exactly. That's actually what the entire neighborhood has been doing. Not necessarily everyone, but pretty much the entire neighborhood has been doing this. So I would be very harsh on those areas. But yeah, I would
What do
definitely
you mean by
get law
harsh?
and order
How would
back.
you do?
I would start prosecuting people, especially the families of the people who have been doing this. I would try to. I'm not sure. I mean, it's very difficult. I mean, to some extent, I know.
The people who've been doing what?
The people who've been hiding terrorists, which is the problem. Is I don't. The problem is you don't necessarily know who did it, but the neighborhood really did.
So would you conduct the Belgian war on terrorism?
No, because the war on terrorism means what we fund foreign dictators, which is not something I want to do. But I would probably start a Belgian war on terrorist embedders, whatever you call it.
Right.
And no, I would just get law and order back. I think that would be the most important thing because our Justice Department is so feeble. It's really insane. I mean, like I said in the beginning, these two people were people who went to the justice system and got out of it. Even though they went to Syria and even though they were robbed, they were awful people who robbed and were crazy. They were deluded and they were clearly Islamist and they went through the justice system and they got out of it pretty much free. And that's a big problem. And obviously immigration would be my solution. And I don't know, just a reestablishment of, I would say, actually I would say an abolishment of multiculturalism, but to some extent that's too late already. I don't know. It's very difficult. Like I said, most of the things that happened are actually already, you can't really change them. You can only do some preventative measures. Yeah, reestablish pre-EU laws. Yeah, I agree. I agree. We should also. I think I might have to do some constitutional reforms as well if I was prime minister. But the problem is I can't.
No,
Really
Yeah, you couldn't do that as prime minister.
I actually wrote a whole paragraph basing on it, so if I can reiterate what I said.
Sure.
A lot of countries pre-EU had immigration laws whereby if, for example, Germany needed labor from Eastern Europe, whereas countries like Czech Republic is not in the EU as far as I'm aware, but Slovakia, I think it is. Well, before it was countries like Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, and so on. If Germany needed labor from those countries, what they did is that they opened the border for the actual people that want to work within the countries. They actually did work, but they were not allowed to stay in. They were not allowed to immigrate. They were simply a labor and then came back to the country and exchanged their marks to the corresponding currency of their own countries and carried on living where they came from. Now, with the rise of the EU, this was completely abolished. They could just move and immigrate to another country. It didn't matter if there was a shortage of labor or not, they just could. So the pre-EU laws made perfect sense. So nowadays politicians say that they need immigration to replace the declining population. Well, that's just bullshit. The pre-EU laws guaranteed labor whilst not guaranteeing immigration. So I think that's the main point.
Do you think? Does anyone else think that there is a correlation between the increase in multiculturalism and the declining natural, whatever country it is, Belgian, whatever, birth rate, the natural birth rate? I mean.
Oh no.
No, I don't think so.
no.
I think the decline is a result of
Sorry.
decline is a result of birth control and education.
Yeah,
basically.
definitely. So birth rate is more influenced by morality and birth control. So the reason birth rates decline in Belgium, for example, is because we had obviously, like in the West, we had a huge sexual revolution here, in which birth control was became very prevalent in society, and people didn't really want to get kids anymore. So that's the prime reason. What then actually happens is, to some extent, it is actually connected to multiculturalism, because what then happens is that politicians will start using this as a rallying call to get immigrants in, because look, our birth rate is so low, so we have to get people in to replace you and pay for your pensions later. Because we obviously have a lot of socialized stuff, so people who come and pay for pensions from other people.
Economics and IQ also affect birth rate.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, I'd say it's more. I mean, to some extent, it's connected, but it isn't the cause. It's simply the cause is more, morals, and also obviously, I think we were the first. I think the 1960s were way more revolutionary, I think, than people think, because birth control is actually very revolutionary if you think about it. It means
And
that
did
women
any
and
of
men
you
actually are pretty much sexually equal. That women don't really have to get pregnant anymore. It's very revolutionary in some sense.
isn't feminism to blame for a lot of that? I think
Well,
it
so
is.
sexual
For
revolution
what? For what?
was partly emphasized by the feminists, yeah, definitely. But that doesn't mean I'm going to blame the feminists for
What
it.
is feminists to blame for? Are you saying?
I mean, I'd say the feminists were very happy with the sexual revolution, and afterwards they actually changed their minds on a lot of things, because at the time they were very pro, and then they were like, "Oops, I'm I'm against porn now, so I don't like the sexual revolution anymore." It's weird.
All right, I think we're kind of we strayed far off with
Yeah,
the
we
Brussels
went a
thing.
bit,
So I think
gone. Yeah.
I think what we'll do is we're gonna kind of tie it up. We're gonna have everybody ask any remaining questions they have to Lenny and
Uh-huh.
give Lenny some final thoughts, and then we'll wrap up. So, Lenny, final thoughts
Um.
on the Brussels
About
thing, on the
Brussels.
EU, on
Right. Yeah, it
everything.
was very oral. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention something very important. So I'll just mention this very brief story. So there was a guy in the Netherlands, a teacher, who asked a rhetorical question on Twitter. He asked like, how would you keep on teaching if your uh, students were celebrating? But he also saw people on the street celebrating, and he got messages from their teachers telling them they were celebrating after the attack.
Okay,
And
Donald Trump.
yeah, pretty much. And Afterwards, he got visited by the police in the Netherlands, and they told him, "You can't stop tweeting about this. This is dangerous. You can't tweet about this. This will only cause right-wing extremism. Stop tweeting about this." And so they went to his door, and they left. And I mean, his story is really not that special. I mean, like I said, I was in a school with 60-70% Muslims, and when Paris attacks happened, they were celebrating. There were a lot of them were actually celebrating the fact that hundreds of people were killed. Or, for example, Charlie Hebdo, actually, a lot of people were very happy about it. They were like, yeah, Charlie Hebdo, they insulted my prophet, so now, it's totally legitimate to kill these people. So, it's very deep if you think about it. It's like the people I go to school with are already pretty much Islamists. Or at least they have
Right.
Islamic sort of.
When was the last extreme right wing attack on Belgium?
I suppose that would be 2002. They would say 2002, which is when one guy killed two people, and it turned out his parents voted for the Flemish nationalists. So obviously it's a right-wing extremist attack. It's sort of like Timothy McVeigh. He was obviously Christian because he went to Catholic school. Uh, so it's sort of similar to him. It was like, oh yeah, his parents were right-wingers, so he was obviously his motivations were right-wing. And that's interesting actually, because 2002, that's the last quote unquote right wing attack that happened. That's also the time when they actually banned guns after the attack. But
I do
anyway,
think
I
though
want to go
that
back to the subject.
Timothy McVeigh, though, I think that he was he had writings to confirm his motivations. I don't think it was all just based on his parents. He did have like a manifesto and stuff. But
Mm.
sorry, go ahead, go on and go whatever you're saying.
Oh, sure, but I'm just saying a lot of people like to use backgrounds of people to
Sure,
sort of
yeah,
look,
absolutely.
without reading any motivation. So the guy didn't really have any racist motivation. Well, actually, I think he was actually racist. But beside that, that was the last right-wing attack, and that was two people that died. And afterwards, they had the gun law passed, which made it illegal to actually own a gun, pretty much. Um, Anyway, so going back to Brussels, it's just very sad. It's I was very sad. I mean, it's even though I say a lot of bad stuff about Belgium all the time. I still like the country. I don't like seeing people die of my country. And, it's just it's but it was very expectable. I mean, if you're gonna have an open border policy, no integration, and or if you're gonna if you're gonna mess up the entire Middle East, and I don't think this is pretty. I'm not saying this we deserve this. I'm just saying this is expectable, and this was going
Right.
to happen because even the prime minister actually said that we expected this. And I don't like the prime minister we have right now, but he was right. They were expecting it, and a lot of failures in the security in the justice department, in the police department, and just all departments. A lot of mistakes were made, and it's going to keep happening. So yeah, I suppose that's my final thoughts. But you can ask me some questions if you still want to.
Okay.
What do you think? Hang on. What do you think the breaking point for Belgium will be before they come to their senses?
I don't think there will be a breaking point. That's just the problem because there. I don't know. It's maybe when. I really don't know. I don't know. I don't think there is really a breaking point. There's always going to be people who are not going to come to their senses, but I don't really think there is going to be a breaking point. There might be, but I'm just pessimistic when it comes to that because
you think that overall you're going to just have an increase of Islam.
yes, you're going to have an increase of Islam, definitely. You're going to have, let's say, more destruction of just what Belgium used to be or whatever. And again, even if like the Dutch part splits from the French part, the Dutch part is still going to be heavily Islamicized. So it doesn't really matter. It's sort of a lot of this doesn't matter to me. It's sort of like it's way too. They all miss the bigger picture. It seems all the parties. They all just go, oh look, yeah, I'm against this and I'm for this. I want to split up Belgium because the Flemish culture is different. Well, the Flemish culture is disappearing, so they're not doing anything to solve that. So yeah, I don't really think there is a breaking point, or there might be. I don't know. I don't know, guys. Is there going to be a breaking point in Sweden? I don't think so.
I mean, in Britain we have somebody called Nigel Farage, and he's
Yeah,
like the breaking. He's basically against. Yeah, you know what I'm getting at. If somebody like this appeared in
Yeah, I'm
Belgium,
not sure. I mean, the Flemish Nationalist Party is really not like UKIP because they're very obsessed by Flemish nationalism, and they care about the EU to some extent. But I mean, Nigel Farage cares a lot about the EU, and I mean, in the way that he talks a lot about it. But the Flemish nationalists, they just like talking about They like talking about Flanders. That's it. They don't talk about anything else. So we don't really have a UKIP party. I have recently found a party in the French part of Belgium with very small support, which is sort of a Belgian unionist UKIP party. So I think we have a UKIP party in the French part of Belgium, but it has one member in the House of Commerce or whatever, or in the Commerce. So, and I think one member in the federal parliament. Oh no, even federal parliament, in the French parliament. And it's such a small party. It's like it has like 1% of the French vote or something. So I don't know. I don't think there's going to be a breaking point soon. I do know the Flemish nationalists are getting more popular. And I'm not really worried about that because I don't think the Flemish nationalists are fascists or something. I just think they're not going to offer any solutions. They're just going to grandstand.
No,
All right.
look at
Any
it.
other
I think
questions?
all right. I'm just.
You
gonna
can
let
ask a question, Gothic. I don't
somebody
care.
else.
You can ask something.
Well, it's my last question anyway. Well,
Yeah, go
it's
ahead.
kind of and I'll just go ahead.
Uh-huh.
Well, I mean, I think Sweden is more hopeful being saved, basically, because of Sverigedemokraterna, the SD
Right.
party.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, that's true.
you're telling me that Belgium doesn't have it, so
No,
would
it
you
doesn't
say
have
that
an ISD
Sweden
party.
is more right wing. There's more sensible policies in Sweden than Belgium. So
To some extent,
carrots.
it actually is, which is very weird. Even though I think Sweden, on the social issues, Sweden is a bit more crazy, because we haven't talked about purple unicorns yet, but I think that's going to come up. But it's mostly like, yeah, there is no Swedish Democrat Party. There isn't the Belgian Democrat Party, whatever you call it. Doesn't exist. Like I said, except the Flemish nationalists. But the Flemish nationalists, or at least I should say the extreme Flemish nationalists, or they call themselves Flemish interest. I'm sorry. They are, like I said, they're fringe and loony, and they're also not really that. They don't really have good policies. I've read all their policies, and some of them are pretty dumb. They wanna like de-establish the euro and have like a neuro and a zero, and you have like the good countries have the neuro and the bad countries have the zero or something. It's something very weird, and they have no real idea of what they're doing. I think so. There's really not any hope in political sphere. I mean, I do know. I read the Belgian. The Belgian security department is worried about neo-Nazis, though. That's something I read, even though they don't exist. I mean, also something I just want you guys to know. This is something that recently came out in the Federal Department of Culture. I already told you guys this, but I thought it might be interesting that our own Department of Culture is saying that Flanders is too white, and we need more diversity because the art scene is way too white. And I mean, that kind of stuff is pretty normal in Belgium. And no one is really saying like that's bullshit or something. And I mean, especially if you look at like all the universities. In my time, university was, I mean, they were just all. There's no resistance. I mean, there is this one crazy student union I've seen, which is sort of a Flemish nationalist student union, but again, they don't do anything. So there's no hope, pretty much. I mean, there might be hope, but I am pretty pessimistic when it comes to that. I think there's hope in other countries, but not in Belgium, because it's just already way too far. And also, especially because Belgium is already such a sort of sectarian country in some extent. It's pretty impossible. I think Sweden actually does have some hope with their Democrats, and especially I think Britain still has something going, especially with their Brexit referendum. But that's it.
Okay, Kimoy, final thoughts or questions?
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead, Val.
What role do you think Gamergate played in the attacks?
I mean, I'm not sure how many autistic nerds were attacked, but I don't know. No, I don't think any. I mean, I do know the Muslims, they like their cannabis, so definitely cannabis played a role. Oh god, I'm just kidding. No, I think they were actually in hashish because that's something the Moroccans like to do a lot. Anyway, that's beside the point. There was no connection to Gamergate. Also, I think Gamergate was condemned by our Belgian government as a sexist movement, if I'm not mistaken.
It probably was.
Oh, of course it was.
I think the Canadian government did something similar.
I'm sure it did.
Yeah, I mean, the European Union has tried for a long time to include anti-feminism as hate speech. So, just saying. That's Belgium also likes that kind of stuff. I think most things you see in the EU are sort of already done in Belgium, pretty much. Our hate speech laws are awful, by the way. I mean, if you can ban a party for saying we shouldn't give welfare checks to immigrants immediately, then they have pretty bad hate speech laws.
Okay,
Schemo, you have a
Pat,
question or something? Or
Roy, Gothic, anyone?
I don't know. I
Question?
like it because they're fun. It's
So
not all
what
about
is the demographic breakdown of migrants in Belgium by
mostly.
sex and nationality?
I don't have a statistic on that because I don't think government collects statistics. It would probably be racist if they did. But if I can have some anecdotal, I can give you anecdotal evidence from Antwerp if I can, or at least my experience. I'd say it's mostly Moroccans and Turks. Turks have their own neighborhoods, and they tend to actually Turks tend to be, from all the immigrants, Turks actually tend to be the best integrated, even though you have a lot of crazies there as well. But mostly Moroccans, and mostly I think it's probably I really don't know the male female, but it's a lot of people from Morocco and a lot of people from Turkey. But like I said, the Turks, I think they've. Let me actually see. Maybe there is statistic, but I don't think the government actually collects that because I think
I
that
have
basis.
applicant data. I don't have people living in Belgium data, but I have applicant data in front of me.
I mean, something that we do know is that about 10% of Belgium is, or at least from, I think 2011, it was 8% of Belgium was Islamic, but that's already increased in 5 years. I'm pretty sure it's already now 12 or 14% or something. Yeah. And I mean, you go ahead.
Okay, let's see. We have Poland, Austria, Belgium. So for Belgium, age-wise, first-time asylum applicants are.
Pat, do you have the data ready or not?
Yep, yeah, it's right in front of my face.
I'm reading that Italians are the biggest, then the Moroccans, and then Turks. That's what I'm reading.
So anyway, this data that's in front of me, we have about 18% age 0 to 13. We have about another 10% age 14 to 17. We have.
Yeah, the age, it doesn't matter.
What?
Age is not that important. Unless we want to talk about an aging population or some other thing like that, I don't see the point.
I think what he's
Okay.
getting at is what are the details for the immigration?
Never mind.
Okay.
I'm confused.
I was
as well.
looking
I'm
up
sorry.
I
Don't
was looking up
worry.
data and I was not able to find
Don't worry
much
about it.
good
It's not
data.
important.
Okay, whatever. Doesn't. I mean, okay. What I'm reading. I mean, Italians. We apparently Italians are a big group of immigrants, but obviously Italians have no problem integrating. I actually don't know that many Italians, but it's mostly what I'm seeing from the statistic here is Moroccans. That's the biggest group, and that will be consistent with my anecdotal uh, evidence, I suppose, from living in Belgium. It's mostly Moroccans that come here. So I suppose that's the largest ethnic group of immigrants, and they have a big issue integrating. Especially in certain areas, they form their own gangs and start annoying people on the streets. And they, especially the youth, they really like annoying people, especially gay couples. Actually, that's something I've noticed. Uh,
You noticed a lot of gay
especially,
couple?
no. If you go to sort of this Moroccan majority cities like Bourakerahat, which is very close to my neighborhood, that's really where you can't walk. Where if two men hold hands, for example, definitely get stabbed or beaten up. Definitely, that's gonna happen.
Right.
So there's definitely that element that's very sort of. Not, I'm not. It's well, not, I don't like the word homophobic, but it's sort of very. Well, it's just very intolerant of anything not Islamic, pretty much.
Okay.
Now,
Anybody else got some final
on the
stuff?
subject of integration and nationalism, I would say that a lot of Western countries really need a higher degree of nationalism, not extreme, but a moderate nationalism to balance out this. I don't know, just this self-loathing that seems to be so prevalent, especially in Europe. Now, I'm kind of out of my element here. I don't know much about Belgium. I don't know shit about Europe, but I know that uh, in terms of the United States, we have Dearborn, Michigan, which is the highest concentration of Muslims in the United States. Now, a lot of Americans don't even know Dearborn exists, and that's because nothing ever happens there.
Ain't that the truth?
I mean, it's just a regular American town full of American Muslims.
Yeah, I think also I think to some extent the Americans have less problems with the Muslims. I mean, obviously you guys had your incidents as well, but I'm not saying the Muslims have
I think
integrated
the
perfectly, but they've
integration
seen
element
Okay,
is
better integration in America than in Europe. And I mean, yeah, sorry, everyone.
yeah, the integration element is definitely stronger in America, I would say. I think that there's not
Well,
as much.
depends.
There is an element of.
Well, don't we have a much smaller percentage of any Muslim
Yeah,
population
you
anyway?
definitely have. I mean, you guys have obviously have more Muslims than us because you guys have a way higher population, and the percentage of it is lower than us. But obviously, we have less people. But I mean, I do think you guys have problems with your integration. But that's more on the southern border, not necessarily with people coming from other places.
Right.
That's another subject. I don't want to delve in that. But I agree with. I think I don't like I said. I don't like word nationalism, but I suppose some not fully self-loathing. That would be a fun position to be in.
I consider myself a moderate nationalist, and that uh, I appreciate my country and the culture here, and I wouldn't want to see it co-opted by immigrants personally.
That's just because of your taxes and a Bible thumper. No, I'm just kidding. But that's pretty much what the argument will be. But yeah, I think, like I said, I think there has to be less self-loading. That's just less self-loading and more, not obviously not utopianize your history, but simply don't bash it. Don't simply bash your
What
ancestors
specific
and
part?
patriarchal.
Sorry for interrupting, but what specific part of Belgium, not particularly to Belgium, but
Mhm.
that is of Belgium, that
Mhm.
you want to keep, that you don't want to lose?
What do you mean?
Like either the culture or anything
Well, I
like
mean,
that.
definitely cool. I mean, okay, I mean, the
Don't
problem
just
is,
say the culture. Say
no,
what part
sure,
of it.
sure, fine, fine. I mean, what I want to preserve in Belgium is all our political institutions, even the monarchy. And I know the monarchy is another subject we can discuss some other time. I mean, I want to preserve, our I mean, our cuisine, our, you know, our history of art, our history of just the architecture that's now being replaced by, which now is being used for like Muslim refugees or something. I don't know. It's, I mean, I know it's culture is a sort of easy term to use, but you know, I could talk an entire hour about just Belgian culture, and then I can't talk in like 5 minutes. But I suppose it would be mostly language, art. That's what culture is collect about. I mean, I
Well,
suppose
I
that's
mean,
Belgian culture.
are there specific values?
Sure. I
Specific
mean,
values.
sure. I mean, what I sure. I mean, there are things in
Example,
America.
want
Okay,
me to
there are
give
things
you
in
an
America that I prefer.
example of things that I would put, I guess? I would probably put the freedom of speech. I'd put due process, as I sort of understand it.
Hmm.
I would put a republic.
Sure.
Uh, I would mention things like that if I was asked this question.
Hmm. Okay. Well, for me, I mean, there are things in other countries which I prefer to some extent. I mean, I don't think we really had a great freedom in the past, but despite I still
But
want
what
to
about,
preserve
for
the part. I
example,
mean, I still want to. Okay. What I want is that people in the future, people from next generations, to have a similar to, I suppose, just know what Belgium was and is, and just know the culture instead of this multicultural. I mean, uh, in a sense, I was kind of deprived of it because I grew up already multicultural Belgium. I never knew what Belgium is about. Only when I talked to all the people from, uh, from my older generations, then you really know what it was about. And I just want that to be, in America. I mean, I think you guys also want people to live in a country that is American. Do you guys want to live in an Islamic country and make sure that your children learn Islamic stuff instead of American stuff? I don't know. That's my. I'm not specifically saying institutions. I just think if you break down the institutions, then the culture will collapse. That's my argument. That's why, like I said, that's why I don't want the monarchy to collapse, because if the monarchy collapses, Belgium will just split up in two, and then you'll just have Flanders, and the French part will probably join France. The Dutch part will probably stay like Luxembourg, probably have its own Republic of Flanders or something, and that's gonna break down in like 100 years or something. So I'm just saying, I just want next generations to live in Belgium. That's Belgium, not Islamic. That's what I'm saying, and that would also include retaining institutions like the monarchy and parliament and the Senate and these things you guys already have. To
why is the monarchy
some extent,
important?
freedom under law, but we don't really have freedom under law. But we'd
Why
have
is the
this
monarchy part important?
because the monarchy, like I said, the monarchy is the only thing hold. Okay, if you want to remove the monarchy from Belgium, you're gonna have to rewrite the constitution. And once you're gonna have to rewrite the constitution, the Flemish part will definitely split from the French part, because a lot of Flemish people want to split. I don't really care. Like I said, it's for me. It's sort of, it doesn't really matter. We're gonna be ruled over by the EU anyway. Um, but it's like I said, the monarchy matters because the monarchy is in our constitution, and it's also a bridge between the French and the Dutch part. That's why it matters. And
What about, wait,
I'm not saying the monarchy is a good system. I'm simply saying it matters to Belgium. Relative to Belgium, it matters. Because if it collapses, then Belgium collapses. That's my argument. Because if you remove it from the constitution, then the Flemish part will simply split from the Dutch part. No, sorry, the Dutch part will simply split from the French part. Because then they have no reason to stay together. Because if this becomes a constitutional republic, if we have the Republic of Belgium, then the French and the Dutch part will have, will we have a French president or a Dutch president? And then you have those arguments made. So that's the reason I want to preserve it. That's simply because of that. Because it's
what
relative to
about
my
the
country, it
way,
matters.
what about the views that say that Islam has on things like sex and their family versus the way
Well, that's actually
Belgium
one
currently
issue
sees
because
it?
apparently, let's see, we have 72% of European asylum-seeking applicants being male. So unless that number gets a little bit more even, you're going to have a surplus of males, especially in the 14 to 17 and 18 to 34 demographics. And young men that don't have jobs or families don't really tend toward productive tasks.
Hmm.
So
Well,
I'm looking over a lot of demographic information.
yeah. Hmm. But yeah, but I mean, like I said, I think there's a lot of things even wrong in Belgium in its older form, but I think it's not going to be solved by just abolishing the entire country, which is what is going to happen if the monarchy is removed. Because then, like I said, I'm not necessarily supporting the concept. I'm simply supporting it in relative to the Belgian government, to the Belgian system or whatever the country. That's the reason I'm defending it here in this
Simply
case.
because it was first, or because you actually value it?
Simply because if you remove it, like I said, if you remove the monarchy from Belgium, then it will not be Belgium anymore, because then it will turn into two different regions. And the French want to stay together simply because the French get money from the Dutch, but the Dutch really want to split off. And
Do you want it to remain united?
like I said, for me it doesn't matter because I would prefer it to stay, but to some extent I don't think it will stay because I think in a couple more decades, if Belgium is more Islamic, they probably want to put an Islamic king in there, and that's going to be a problem. That's going to be the Kingdom of Belgistan or whatever. I don't know what it's going to be called, but I just think it relative to my country. If I want Belgium to stay together, it has to exist because not it has to, but it has to keep existing because that's in our constitution. And once you start, if you want to break that, because it's literally, I think the monarch is pretty much 1/3 of our constitution. That talks about the responsibilities and how it relates to parliament and whatever. And so if you want to remove all that from the constitution, then it will shatter the country, and that might be a good thing. I don't know, but I'm just
Well,
saying.
I mean, if it didn't have monarchy, say it had something like what the U.S. has.
Oh no, sure, but the problem is if it had something like if it had a republic, then it would have a completely different history, and I don't know what it would look like. I think Belgium would be different with a with a republic. Maybe it will be better, or maybe it will be worse. I really don't know. I don't think I can simply replace the monarchy now with the republic and think it's going to be exactly the same, because it will be entirely different. Uh, Maybe for the better, maybe for the worse. I don't know. I can only judge from what is Belgium is now and what it has been. I can't hypothesize about some other, uh,
So
structure.
wait, does monarchy have power then? Because you make it sound like
The,
it's used its
no,
power.
the only reason the monarchy doesn't really have power, but the monarchy has power to the extent that the Constitution grants it powers. So it has powers. It actually has powers, but it doesn't really have effective powers. But I'm simply saying it's symbolic, and it's also technical, because once you want to remove it, you're going to have to write the entire constitution. Like I said, when you do that, then the Flemish will definitely split up, because once it will be rewritten, they will find some way to turn it into a confederation, which is what they want, and then it will simply split into two. So for Belgium's sake, if you want Belgium to stay together, then you have to support the monarchy, which
Do
is
you
why
do you want Belgium to stay together?
I already answered. I don't know. I already answered this. I don't care.
Because
It's
it
for me.
sounds like you really do because you want the
Yeah,
monarchy.
to some extent I do. Yes, I do want Belgium to stay together, simply because I don't think Flanders will be good enough, or will be very small, will be insignificant, and yeah, yeah, I want Belgium to stay together. That's supposed to be my position. But now we've gone into completely different territory than from Brussels, so I'm sorry for that. But I mean, we could. I mean, that's the only reason I support the monarchy. It's simply for that technical reason. So.
Well, the point I was trying to get at, I guess, was I'm trying to figure out what part of Belgium you like.
Well, I mean, I like it because I was born here. I mean, I think that's a sufficient reason. I mean, obviously, there are things here that I don't like. Like I said, I think a lot of draconian. I mean, I'd say there's a lack of freedom, or at least a relative freedom. I think you guys have more freedom in America or in some other countries than we do. I think there are things that can definitely be improved, but like I said, I think it can all be improved with the institution itself. I don't think you need to abolish the entire country. That's simply what I'm saying. Uh,
Is there any are there any positive side effects of the immigrants?
I mean, sure, the employers will have low-wage workers. I mean,
For you, not just
for
for
me,
them.
not really. I mean, not. I mean, I'm gonna have multicultural dinners with people. Woohoo! I'm such a cool
Yeah, you
guy.
get to eat their food.
I get to eat their food. I get to hire them as ladies or whatever. I mean, cleaning people. But outside of that, I don't think there will be
Do you
much
think they'll
cultural.
bring like a more traditional family or anything? I mean, like they'll bring
I mean,
back
that's
family values.
I mean, to some extent, I do want there to be more traditional structures going on. At least less sort of promiscuity. Like I said, Belgium is the highest divorce rate in Europe, so we really have promiscuity problems here. Uh, but the problem is the Muslims are they have a different notion of marriage to some extent because they marry with 11-year-olds. You know, that's pretty weird. They also have some polygamous marriage. So it's not going to bring anything back, because I mean, all the Muslims who are here are actually pretty promiscuous. It's only their parents that are very traditional, but they
Okay.
themselves.
So they're not even going to bring that back.
No, they're not even going to bring. They're not even going to remove some of the crazy stuff the feminists have done in my country. No.
So it seems like basically the only part they've integrated is the sex.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's interesting because I mean, a lot of Muslims in my country were simply watching pornography during lessons or something. That's something they did, and they were. I mean, they were sort of. They were devout to some extent, but also they ignored a lot of their own stuff. They were devout to the extent that they preferred their Islamic values to the Belgian ones, but they didn't necessarily keep to their Islamic values. If you get what I'm saying. But yeah, it's not going to do anything. It's simply, it's the Islamic system is simply not. It's not able to cope with the Western system of law. And especially in America and England, your common law system, it's going to be. I mean, the European system. I have some issues with the European law system, but it's still way better than the Sharia law system, which is a theocratic one. And well, to some extent, I could argue that the European laws were based on Greco-Roman and Judeo-canon laws. That doesn't mean they're theocratic, but the Sharia ones are really theocratic. So.
Okay, so let's get everybody's final 2 cents on everything, and then let's close the stream up. So, Val?
So the European, it's a clear case of what works for one country doesn't necessarily work for another.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Pat?
I don't know. I think Europe needs to stop immigrating, stop its immigration policy and whatnot, and then deal with the problem within, and go from there. But that's going to take a very long time, and it's probably not going to happen. It's not going to happen. But yeah, that's what they need to do.
Pretty much.
Kimoy?
I don't have a whole lot to say. I guess the San Bernardino shooting was relatively near my area, but I think some of these things are unavoidable. They're just going to happen, and but hopefully it will convince some people to be more, cautious. I guess I don't know, but that's all I can say.
Gothic?
Well, I think the media, the European media, and the United States media, all
Christ,
around the
dude,
globe.
there's a fucking...
What
Is
are
there
you
like
doing?
a helicopter in the background? What the fuck?
Yes, there's a bloody helicopter. No, it's the
You
bloody
got like a wood chipper?
stupid engineers. No, it's the retarded engineers from the stupid laptop. They placed the microphone right next to the bloody fan. So obviously,
Oh.
I don't hear the fan as much as you do, but I think it's better now.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you're
It is
good. Go
slightly
ahead.
better. I can finish my. I think the European media as well as the United States media and all around the globe need to be held accountable for their own actions.
Mhm.
They are incredibly powerful institutions in manufacturing consent, in manufacturing the consent towards the immigration and calling people racist and so on. They need to be held accountable, and the monopoly, basically the multicultural monopoly that is currently all around Europe, from Germany to United States and so on, all around the globe, it needs to be brought down. We need a diversity of opinions, a diversity of the views, unlike the monolithic idea that penetrates the media all around. So that's my final 2 cents.
Okay, and Lenny.
Yeah, I think Belgium's pretty much done. The only thing we can do is take. We can only, I'd say, there might be some breaks we can pull, but I'm not sure how long it's going to take for Belgium is not going to exist anymore. Is going to be radically different than it used to be, and that's it.
Okay, well, thanks for everyone for joining us tonight, and I hope you enjoyed the show, and we will see you next time. Take it easy, everyone.
Bye bye.